There are several versions of this story, but the favoured one is that of the prince and the tailor. Now there was a prince who found in his vicinity a tailor who tailored garments just to his satisfaction. But after visiting the tailor on many an occasion, he became quite close to him. He began to revere him because he could see that this tailor was totally dedicated to his task. Even though he would be speaking to his clients, his measuring was perfect. Every stitch that he made was done with great care and perfection. So they became friends. And there was a time when the wife of the tailor gave birth to a son. And so the prince sent the tailor a bolt of very fine silk to make a garment for his son, which the tailor did, making a beautiful jacket for him when he was grown. But there was a time when it was the occasion of the prince's birthday, so he sent a personal invitation to the tailor and his wife to attend the birthday reception. So, dressing themselves in their Sunday bests, the tailor and his wife went to the reception. But when they showed their invitation to the doorman, even though it was obviously one from the prince himself, the doorman disallowed them from entry because of their appearance. There was no spangles, there was no tiara, there was no embroidered waistcoat. So they were turned away. When they came back to their home and told the story to their son, he was incensed with anger. And remembering the garment that had been tailored for him from this bolt of silk, he dressed himself up in this jacket, and taking the invitation, he presented himself to the reception and was very readily invited in. But when he went into the reception hall, to the great dismay of those who were around, the young man took off his jacket and began to rub some of the sweetmeats that were displayed on the reception table onto his jacket. And then when the music started, he danced around the hall, dancing with his jacket. And the prince was embarrassed and affronted and went over to the young man and said, why are you embarrassing us like this? And the young man told his story about how his mother and father, the tailor and his wife, had been refused entry because of their garments. So he said to the prince, because it's my garments that gave me entry into your reception, I decided to let them have the feast. But being totally abashed by this, the prince, even though it was late in the evening, he immediately sent a carriage to the house of the tailor and his wife and brought them back to the palace, even though they were wearing their night attire and their slippers, and he put them in pride of place in the reception hall. Appearances. Perhaps you've noticed, as I have, that there are an increasing number of people displaying tattoos. And the other day, when Gail and I were shopping, I was going to the toilet at Smithfield, and there was a young woman standing outside, and she had tattoos all up her arm and across her chest, which were openly shown. So I went up to her and I said, what very beautiful tattoos. I'm sure they're telling wonderful stories. Well, she was quite surprised, but she laughed and said yes. And that reminded me of a somewhat, you could say, off-color story, but it allows us to explore more of this topic of appearances. There was an occasion where there was a young man who had an accident and was taken into hospital, and all the nurses couldn't wait to get together in the nurses' quarters. And they said, "Have you seen the new patient? He's got tattoos all over his body." And one of the nurses said, "He's even got a tattoo on his penis, and it says, 'damn.'" But then there was time when a very young and voluptuous young nurse had to go and tend to him, and when she came out to the nurses' quarters, she couldn't wait to tell her, yes, he's got tattoos all over his body, everywhere, but that one on his penis doesn't say damn, it says Amsterdam. So this story reminds us of the way of stories. And, I was reading the other day, and to paraphrase a saying of the Dalai Lama, when we talk, we're displaying our knowledge. But when we listen, we oftentimes learn something. So, in exploring these appearances and knowing, if you think as I do, that these wonderful beings who are now tattooing and displaying their stories openly on their bodies, if we dared to ask, what's behind your story? Even though it might be a demon on a bikie's back, or an eagle displayed across a chest, or flowers that are peeping out from a sleeve, what we would find. What is this way of stories? Not just telling stories, but listening to stories. In this place we now find ourselves, where we're receptive and open, and yet our faculties, our abilities on the three levels of life are now so merged that they're all working for this. What wonderful, wonderful things we might learn from evoking. Now that people are willing to display on their bodies their stories, to me is an opening, a key, if we dare to ask about those stories. What's behind that story? Isn't it with these beautiful people who are now showing these stories on their bodies, are saying, listen to me, hear my story? Perhaps, do you think like I do? Because each time you look at someone, in the supermarket or walking down the aisles, showing these stories. And you try not to really stare at them, but can't help but wonder, what's behind that rose? What's behind that demon? Would you agree with me with this, that this is a wonderful chance, an opening? Anyone who dares to display their story on their bodies, to me, is inviting, asking. Would you say so? What's your thought about appearances now? Are you repelled by someone who's got demons and fangs dripping blood on their armpits, or and thinking, oh, what's your thought about appearances and what's now being displayed by so many? Your thoughts. And maybe we can ask, why don't we need tattoos? What is it that we display that needs no invitation?